we define God. God is light, and God is love, and God is inexorable law. God is the invisible, motionless, sexless, undivided, and unconditioned white magnetic light of omnipotent, omnificent, and omnipresent mind. In all this universe of countless many things, there is but one light, which is mind of God, and the two extended lights of his thinking, which his imagining created to manifest his being in seeming action. There is naught else in all nature than God's knowing mind at rest and the motion of mind thinking. God's knowing is magnetic. God's thinking is electric. God has but one ideal, one desire, one purpose, one action, and one law. His one ideal is his unity in Father-Mother love. His one desire is to think action and rest from action in sequential intervals. His one purpose is to think his knowing of what he is and what he knows into his own image. His one action is to give. His one law is that what he gives must be balanced by equal re-giving. His law of balance is the law of love, upon which his universe is founded. For God is love, and the universe must reflect his image. God's magnetic light universe is at rest. It is balanced. God's electric universe must, likewise, be balanced in its rest, its actions, and in its givings and re-givings. God's one law of balance must be inexorably obeyed, as that part of it which is known as gravity must be inexorably obeyed. To think what he is and what he knows into imaged forms to manifest him by motion, God divides his still magnetic light into electric mate pairs. He extends these pairs, which he has divided, to two measured magnetic foci, which he, likewise, extends to balance this division, and multiplies their power of control over action to manifest his omnipotence in the ratio of their extension. The two magnetic foci, which are magnetic poles in man's knowing, are extended from his fulcrum stillness along wave paths of his eternal stillness to control their manifestation of his imagining from within all creating bodies, and to balance their separateness from without. He likewise divides his omnipresence by centering every particle of creating matter in his whole limitless universe with the still light of his own presence. From each center where he thus stands, he reaches out his right arm to one pole and his left arm to the other one, to form a shaft around which each separate unit of all creation must move to manifest the cycles of his thinking. In this manner, each mind-centered body in all creation has at its command and as its inheritance all power and all knowledge to draw upon in the measure of man's desire and in the measure of the awareness of God's centering presence within each unit. Eons pass before aught but sensation, then instinct, make bodies aware of the centering light of that divine presence. Long ages pass before thinking and knowing transcend sensation and instinct. When thinking begins, knowing also begins. More long ages pass before God's ultimate creation, man, knows of his divinity through full comprehension of the whisperings of the inner silent voice, which forever says to him, "What I am, you also are." God, the one knower, becomes three by his imagining. The still light of the knower and the moving lights of his thinking are the Trinity, which God is in all things in this universe. Figure 19 illustrates the entire process of creating and recreating matter. The Father-Mother electrically divides his oneness into pairs of father and mother bodies. The electrical strain of separation is equaled by an opposite strain or tension of desire for oneness. Unity thus attained is repeated in similar electrically dividing and uniting pulsations forever. Another way of stating the same thing: God, the Creator, divides his one white light by extending its oneness into electrical tensions of vibrating red and blue pairs. The tensions of this electrical division are equaled by a desire for unity, which is attained at the point of white incandescence in matter. Unity thus attained is repeated forever by the same dividing, uniting process of electrical action-reaction pulsations. Reproduction cannot take place until the red and the blue lights of sex-divided motion are voided in the still white light of the Creator. Man alone of all creation ever knows of his omnipotence. God, the one Father-Mother, divides his sexlessness to extend father and mother bodies from his oneness. The one desire of these separated male and female particles or masses is to unite, to void their separateness. Upon this formula, God's electric universe of motion is founded. The sexless Father-Mother Creator is one. His extended sex-conditioned male and female bodies are the completion of his Trinity. Rest and action are three. Space and matter are three. Equilibrium and motion are three. Dimensions and pressures are three. The heartbeat of the universe and yours are three. Likewise, its breathings and yours, its temperatures and yours, and all things else of the universe and you are three. The swinging of the pendulum is three, as the spectrum and the fulcrum and lever also are three. The cathode is one, but its extended pairs of anodes in the electric current of man and of space adds up to three. Science is one, but silence is one. But sound springs from silence when its divided moving pair collide. So sound is three, and its vibrations in sequences of rest and action are also three. God is one in all cause, but in all effect he is three. And all that are three are nine. For all that are three are multiplied by three in this visible cube-dominated universe of three dimensions. God decentrates his electric thinking to imagine ideal. He then concentrates to form a moving body image of ideal. Mind decentration and electric depolarization are one. Mind concentration and electrical compression are likewise one. General activity, compression, and polarization are also one. They constitute the life principle. Radioactivity, expansion, and depolarization are one. They constitute the death principle. Man's mind and God's mind are one. Man's thinking and God's thinking are one. Man decentrates to conceive ideal and concentrates to create a body in the image of his ideal, exactly as God does. God's thinking is electrically expressed by extension from a point of rest in space to a compressed point of rest in matter. It then electrically expands to a point of rest in space to disappear into its source. This is God's way of dividing rest with action. It is also man's way during all of his brief cycles. But when the rest interval for the longest cycle comes, he calls it death and the end. For man does not yet know that God's ways and man's are one, nor does he yet know that he cannot die. Man charges his batteries that way to give them life. He discharges them to void their life, then recharges them. All bodies are batteries. Growing bodies are charging batteries. Nature's bodies are charged batteries. Discharging batteries are dying batteries. Discharged batteries are likened to dead bodies. There is no life in them because there is no motion. Nature forever recharges her bodies, beginning her charging in their seed and discharging back to seed. Life is motion. Death is rest. Each is fulcrum of the other. There is no death in nature save man's belief in death. God's magnetic light is eternal life. God's thinking is eternal life in action, divided by rest. Life in matter is but a pulsing simulation of eternal life in God, the One. God's thinking is universal. His actions spring from his thinking. Therefore, God's actions are universal. Thoughts do not take place just here or there where they began. They are everywhere, and their beginning and ending are one. Actions, likewise, are as omnipresent as their source in mind thinking. That which happens anywhere happens everywhere in this universe of naught but mind extension. Ideal has no extension, but ideal, divided by imagining, extends into an imaged infinity and repeats its divisions like unto the infinity which the kaleidoscope repeats and multiplies its imagining as it repeats. When God thinks at any one point of rest in his universe, that point becomes the center of an invisible cube of white magnetic light. From there it is harmonically repeated as cube centers throughout his cosmic kaleidoscope, at the rate of several hundred billions of cyclic pulsations every second. Their speed of extension into this three-dimensional illusion is about 186,400 miles per second. Radical expansion of beginning points compress motion into cube planes of rest in space. These are reflecting mirrors of magnetic light, which project God's thought-imaged forms onto his universal screen of space, to simulate a reality of existence where not anything is, not even the motion which so convincingly seems to be there. Invisible cubes of magnetic light and of zero curvature are the boundings of wave fields within which the curved universe of reflected spherical forms are projected to constitute this electric thought wave universe of complex illusion. God begins each electric thought wave at a point of His white light. At the intersection of the three inner planes of the cube, which are at right angles to each other. This point of beginning is the wave fulcrum. It is also the point of ideal conception in mind. It is the centering eye of the inert gas of the elements which spring from that plane. It is, likewise, the cathode center of man's electric current, and the beginning of the wave shaft, which extends two ways to divide the red half of the spectrum from the blue, to create separated father and mother bodies. Here also is where time and all other dimensions begin, as well as all other effects, such as life, compression, polarization, and heat. Here also is where all depolarizing dimensions and effects center. One of its hemispheres, however, is still the red light of the Father, and the other one is the blue light of the Mother, for each is still extended from its centering oneness. Now here is one of Walter Russell's drawings of a cube, and you can look at that a while, and I hope you can understand this. I'm reading this and not understanding it, but I read it nevertheless. Every polarized action-reaction counts up to 9, never more, never less. The wave octave formula for the elements of matter and the color spectrum is 9, being 8 centered by 0 as follows. And you see, or with numbers, it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, upon which our decimal system is founded. The total count of equators is 9. The 8 corners of the cube and its centering 0 equal 9. The 8 sections of the divided cube centered by 0 are also 9. The zeros upon each of the 9 equators total 9, being 8 centered by 0. God's magnetic cube is 3 multiplied by 3. Its planes of 0 curvature are 9, and its boundary angles are the 8 corners and the centering one of the fulcrum, source. Cube wave fields are the 8 mirrors of magnetic light which project dimensioned and conditioned forms to all the universe from one wave field to another throughout all creation. Divided light opposes its division. Opposed pressures arise from resistance to this division. Curvature arises from resistance to two-way opposed motion. Resistance is gentle at cathode beginnings, but multiplies its resistance with cyclonic fury at anoid endings. Here is where gravity collisions of sex unions born whirling incandescent carbon, silicon, or suns, according to the measure of mind desire exerted electrically at anoid points. Within the magnetic cube of 0 curvature, a universe of opposed curved pressures is born. Each curved pressure within it is a lens to multiply or divide, heat or freeze, compress or expand, solidify or vaporize all pressures of motion which pass through its concavity or convexity. In this manner, God's curved universe of curved directions and curved cellular forms appear upon His cosmic screen for an interval to simulate the many and the complex. and then disappear into his oneness to rest for an interval between thought pulsation frequencies. Thus the cube, which is the oneness of all form, is imaged as the sphere in God's imaged universe. The cube and the sphere are one. The sphere is an incandescent cube, and the cube is a frozen sphere. The planes of the cube are 9, and their projections into the spectrum of the incandescent sphere are 9. Frozen incandescent spheres of carbon become cubes. They image the cube of their cold wave field. Their wave position is the only one of undivided balance in the wave, and all other positions are unbalanced because of their separateness, but balanced with an equally unbalanced mate. That is also why the very many moving particles in octave waves exhibit different qualities and transient changing forms, to which man gives so many names, not knowing that one which he names this becomes that almost timelessly. I'll read that again. That is also why the very many moving particles in octave waves exhibit different qualities and transient changing forms, to which man gives so many names, not knowing that one which he names this becomes that almost timelessly. That is why heating, moving forms are curved and cellular, while cold ones lose their curvature and reflect the planes of zero curvature of their cube source in space. Water drops are cellular when warmed above their freezing points, but below that point they become hexagonal crystals to reflect their position in their cube wave. Vast complexities of crystal forms thus arise from balanced and unbalanced matings, and from separateness as well, such as the distorted cubes of copper or sodium iodide, or the octahedrons and dodecahedrons of more dense elements further removed from wave amplitudes. I'm hoping somebody understands this because it's beyond me now. Sorry, I just had to interject that. Let me see how long this chapter is. I'll try to read the rest of it. God's mind centers all things, all minerals, all vegetables, all animals, and every cell which constitutes their bodies. He gives life and purposefulness to all things. Bodies acquire awareness of purpose only through electrical messages of command from mind, which centers them, for no body could otherwise move, survive, or fulfill its purpose without being centered and polarized by mind. Cells, glands, white or red corpuscles, hormones, and other parts of bodies must fulfill their purposes. In themselves they are helpless to move or act their parts in nature's plan. Each part and each whole of all cell groups is centered by the intelligence which centers the whole structure, whether ant, violet, or man. Every creating particle of matter in the universe is a polarized mind extension. When each particle disappears to rest for each pulsation interval, it withdraws within that intelligence from which it extended as a patterned form of ideal. Man is the consummate image of God's imagining, just as carbon is the consummate element. It is not a part of God's intent that carbon should have inner awareness of its divine origin and identity, but it is intended that man should have. Mind and soul centers every carbon crystal, nevertheless, or it could not fulfill its purpose as part of the patterned body of tree or man. In all this vast universe, there is naught but mind and thought motion. All motion is but an electric recording of the mind thought which centers it. It is also the record of the ideal it simulates. In the ideal is purpose of ideal. In the electric recording, therefore, the mechanics of ideal, thought, and purposefulness are lodged. Otherwise, the Creator could not create. God's universe is living and is purposeful. Wherever there is motion, there also is God, commanding his thought forms to fulfill their purposes. Know thou that God does not extend his self into his moving universe, for the God light is still. Its stillness centers all things, and it likewise centers the shafts of all motion, which turn around it, shafts which are levers of fulcrums, and end at poles with measured extensions. Naught exists but God. Man exists as one with God, but until he is aware of his oneness, he is but a thought-recording image of God's imagining. Some day he will know, however, for that is God's intent in creating man. Know thou, therefore, that motion merely simulates God's knowing and God's qualities, and the purposefulness of his divine drama of creation. Simulations are not reality, however, nor do they exist. Imaginings come and go. They change and have dimension. God's imaginings are not God, however. The play cannot be the playwright. When God, the Father-Mother, divided the light of his sexless oneness into the red light of the Father and the blue light of the Mother, he ordained that the Father light must penetrate the light of the Mother and be forever within her womb to live, and without her womb to die. Thus it is that the red fires which center our Father of earth lie enfolded within the blue coolness of earth's crust, and the cooling blue oceans and atmospheres of the encircling mother womb. Thus it is that the compression of the mother womb generates heat to polarize and vitalize the father seed of life, which is enfolded in that womb. That process of sex interchange between the blue and the red lights, which beget life, continues to beget life to give back to its source until the mother can no longer compress life into the father, and the father can no longer discharge heat into the mother, to continue to beget father and mother bodies. When this has come to pass, both expand. The earth emerges from the surrounding womb of the sun to cool and thus beget a father within her pregnant womb, to continue God's one process of creating bodies until both father and mother slowly depolarize by expansion of both, and both continue their journey into the magnetic cold from which they emerged. Mother and father reverse their spectrum positions, however. The womb of the mother is on the inside, and the father surrounds it by a ring, such as one sees in the Lyra Nebula. One can also see the birth of a new star in the very center of that great black cathode hole which the mother womb is. That is the way that God turns the anoids of his thinking inside out to rest, and outside in to again become anoids. God's process of creating bodies through sex interchange is based upon the sex urge of the divided color spectrums of light to void its color divisions and become the white light of rest, from which its tensions were extended. God is one, at eternal rest. Creation is two, in the perpetual tensions of motion. The divided two